Hi. Hi. So, afternoon, everybody. I hope you all can hear me and Tim both. Please do ping in the chat box if you're not able to hear us or if you do. So thanks for taking time out for the webinar on successful blogging for accountancy firms this afternoon. Just some basic information before we begin. So the webinar will finish by 12:30. We will be sending a recording to all of you, all the attendees later this week. We'll also be taking the questions along, as we progress in the webinar. So feel free to ping your questions, in the questions box, during the webinar or even after the webinar. We will also be sending everyone a feedback questionnaire. So do take, about a minute out to send us your feedback. Really important for us to know if you like the content and what improvements you'd want to see in next webinars. So here on, obviously, what we will be covering in the webinar is going to be, questions on, generally, how. So obviously, a lot of us have questions about, how do we go about blogging? And what kind of, blogs. So, we have questions like, how often do we blog? Do we need, short or long blogs? Do we, obviously, how often do we find time to write the blogs? How do we, engage our colleagues? How do we promote our blogs effectively? How do we turn our blogs into leads and then leads into clients? And obviously, how do we measure the impact? And then, obviously, how do we answer all your questions in terms of, obviously, how effective can we blog? So obviously, my name is Ketan Gajjar. I work with initgrobol. Obviously, we work for accounting firms, providing accounting services and then payroll bookkeeping services to our clients. So here on, obviously, my colleague Tim, colleague and a good friend, Tim will sort of take it from here. Tim runs award-winning public relations agency, Kelso Consulting, obviously, which works for numerous accountancy firms. Prior to setting this up, Tim held, obviously, some senior roles in Deloitte and Arthur Andersen. He's also been advising firms of all sizes on business development issues for almost over 25 years. So, Tim, over to you now.
Thank you very much, Ketan. And we've got quite a few people on who know Kelso Consulting already and some clients, and welcome to you. We've also got people who are new to us, so welcome to you as well. Just to let you know, we're a reputation builders, we're a PR agency. We do various things to help professional firms and indeed other businesses build powerful reputation, develop leads. This could be through public relations, getting press coverage, developing strong thought leadership, effectively using LinkedIn, and indeed through helping them blog effectively. And it's based on this and indeed our own experiences that I'll be sharing a lot of hints and tips. Ultimately, really, blogging should be one of the cornerstones for marketing for most professional firms, certainly for accountancy firms. And, I'd like to, the first thing is, why is this? Well, back in 1993, David Maister, some of you may have heard of him. He is the professional services business guru, wrote one of his seminal books, Managing the Professional Service Firm. And he said, quite rightly, marketing works when it demonstrates, not when it asserts. Marketing tactics that illustrates one's competence, such as speeches, seminars, and articles, are infinitely more powerful than things like brochures, direct mail, and cold calls. If the internet had been around in 1993, he would have added blogging to it. David Meister. Indeed, he now blogs and he now does videos as well. But successful marketing, as he highlights, is all about demonstrating your expertise, not asserting it. And there is no more powerful way of doing that through articles. And we'll be using the term blogs and articles interchangeably, as a blog is ultimately an online article. So why blog? It very powerfully demonstrates your knowledge. Going back to David Meister's point, if it's well done, it will attract prospects to your website. From there, it is up to you to convert them into leads and then into clients, and we'll be talking about that as well. It also creates powerful content for your social media. Indeed, social media works on the basis of having interesting and relevant stuff that people want to like and share, and that should be what your blogs are. It gives great content for you to further reuse widely in your marketing, perhaps in your direct mail, or indeed as a follow-up to a meeting, send them a link to some relevant blogs, that sort of thing. And ultimately, when it's done well, it generates clients, and we'll be talking all about that. What I'd like to say though is you shouldn't think about blogging as building up a long list of subscribers who get every blog you do. That's slightly outdated thinking. It's nice if it happens, but the reality is there's 4 million blogs or so posted every day. So that's 4 million, including your one. So it is a bit of a big hope that you are going to be persuading lots of people to subscribe to your every blog, although that is possible if you are regularly producing high quality content. But it's not about having a long list of subscribers, it's about you promoting your blogs through search engine optimization and through email and social media, which we will be discussing. Now, we have some numbers, as we've got lots of accountants on and they love numbers and charts. So we're going to be sharing these, particularly from HubSpot, but not only from HubSpot. HubSpot, for those who don't know it, is an online blogging and inbound marketing platform. It has 13,500 businesses that use it for their website and its blog. So, and indeed, we're one of those as well. So we're familiar with it, have used it for many years, but it means it has a large pool of data to draw on, and we'll be sharing some of those charts. So just to talk through them, they have the index going up the left-hand side, and then whatever it is we're talking about going across on the bar charts. Blue is business to consumer. For most people online, it's the orange one that matters, business to business blogs. So the first thing to draw to your attention is that it's the number of blogs that matter. It's not to say that having only a handful of blogs is going to have no impact. The index there is 100. That's simply what it's being compared to. But what it does mean is the more blogs you build up, the bigger the benefit in terms of the number of leads. So as you will see, and it's not surprising, but it's nice to see the numbers, that according to their research, the more blogs you produce, the more inbound leads you get. But it's not just them who said it. Another group, Traffic Cafe, they say once you've written above between 24 and 51 posts, your blog traffic jumps by 30%. So whether you go with HubSpot, maybe they're right. Whether you go with Traffic Cafe, maybe they're right. Maybe they're both right. But either way, there is an important cumulative effect through having more blogs, and we'll be looking at that a bit more. Now, going to the questions that we want to cover. The first thing people ask is, how frequently should you blog? Well, the reality is that you are probably not blogging frequently enough, but it is still better to blog. If you can only blog monthly, that is better than never. If you can blog weekly, that is much better than monthly. If you're able to blog 2 or 3 times a week, if you've got that sort of resource, then that is even better still. Certainly, HubSpot says that those who blog more than do 16 times a month, so that is a huge amount of 4 times a week, which for certain firms, if you're above a certain size, is very possible. But if you're doing that sort of frequency, you get 3.5 times more traffic than those who post much fewer. So here is their one. If you blog monthly, the index, so again, having an index of 100 doesn't mean there's no effect, but that's what it's being compared to. If you blog 4 or 5 times, that's maybe once a week, you will see that you start to get significantly more impact. And if you are blogging 11 times, so that is 2 to 3 times each week, or even 4 times a week, you get a dramatic increase in traffic. Perhaps not surprisingly, but it's nice to see the numbers. But how does this translate into leads? Well, again, according to HubSpot and their analysis of the firms that use it, again, in terms of lead generation, the more you blog, the more leads you get. Now, what I'd say about HubSpot is they probably underestimate this, because they will probably be measuring the number of times people click on a box or something like that to submit their details as an inquiry. Certainly our experience with HubSpot is that if people are interested with getting in contact with us, they will typically phone us, even if they happen to be on our website at that point. Maybe that's your experience as well, but either way, I think these things slightly underestimate it, in fact somewhat underestimate it, at least in our experience. So we've talked about the importance of the volume of blogs. We've talked about the importance of frequency, and clearly you've got to decide what frequency is achievable, and we'll be talking a bit more about how to make it more achievable. But the next question is, should our blogs be short or long? And by short, I mean, I think we can agree that 200 words is going to be too short. There's some debate over what's the minimum that works with Google, but I'd certainly recommend something between 300 and 400 or 500 words as short, and long is when we're getting over 900 words, and that could be 900 words, it could be 2,000 words. So what does the data out there say? Well, certainly long blogs have lots of benefits to them. For instance, if you look at what ranks on the first page of Google, typically longer pages. In fact, the average word count is 1,890, which shows that there's you certainly draw the conclusion that pages with lots of words, such as long blogs, tend to rank more highly on Google. In fact, they tend to rank very prominently. Also, the research shows that long articles typically attract more social shares. So not only are they appearing more prominently on Google, but they're also being shared and liked more. And of course, as accountants intuitively know, in-depth articles demonstrate your authority to readers better than short, punchy ones, or at least most of the time. However, before you step back in horror and think, oh my goodness, we've got to be writing an essay every time. Actually, I'm going to make the case that you should be doing many more shorter blogs and using the long ones sparingly, particularly at the outset. Going back to the earlier sides, frequency and volume also brings search engine optimization benefits. Its volume matters as well as length. And actually, you probably, particularly if you're starting a blogging program, want to build up the volume. Of course, it is quality that matters. Short rubbish blogs or long rubbish blogs are never going to attract clients. And we'll be talking about quality later on, but we'll assume good quality. Secondly, and I think very importantly, particularly within the feasibility of people within accountancy firms, the shorter blogs are obviously faster and easier to produce. This is very important if you want to have frequency, and ultimately Google likes websites that are updated regularly. If you do a big splurge of blogs once at the start of the year and then your website has you don't do any more for the rest of the year, that is far less impactful than doing one a month or one a fortnight. Google wants to see websites that are regularly being updated, not cobwebby. Clearly also it means they're fast to produce. It's particularly important when a topic is topical and you want to do a quick reaction to it. Certainly there's room for a more in-depth analysis down the line, but you certainly want to be getting things up quickly while people are searching for them. Also, shorter blogs makes it easier to get others involved. We'll come on to that later on, but it is critical if you're going to get more blogs is to make it easier for other people to do them. And going back, you can actually say an awful lot with 400 words if they are well written, well chosen, maybe not a detailed technical in-depth analysis, but certainly in terms of comment, advice and covering strategic issues, you can say an awful lot. So I'd like to say a little bit now about coming up with ideas, and having suitable ideas is where a lot of bloggers go wrong, particularly accountancy firms, but other businesses as well. They set themselves a target of 1, 2, 3 blogs a month. It's coming to the end of the month, nothing's been written, so they desperately go around for anything and put it up just to make sure that there's something on the blog. So and quite frankly, all they end up with is a lot of random postings that's probably doing them very little benefit. So you need to be able to come up with ideas. What are good sources of topics for your blogs? Well, the first and best source to my mind is the sorts of questions your clients ask you. There will be common questions that come up regularly, and if your clients are asking them to you, then they are probably searching online looking for answers as well. Indeed, one of my best performing blogs, which I wrote ages ago and still attracts regular flow of traffic, was whether you should work for a PR agency on retainer or on a project basis. So I tackled that in a fairly long blog, and it continues to be one of my best performing blogs about 2 years after I wrote it. Not just what questions clients ask you, but what you will invariably, as an accountant, regularly come across common problems at clients. If it's a common problem at your client, it's a common problem at other businesses. You'll probably think, why don't people sort this thing out? Well, write a blog about it. Top tips to avoid, or whatever it's going to be. If it's a problem at your clients, it's a problem elsewhere, and there will be lots of people looking for help dealing with it. Failing that, there's a very useful tool. I'm going to see if I can fire it up, the HubSpot blog topic generator, which suggests lots of ideas. While that's loading up, I'll give it a quick demo. You can get ideas. Lots of accountants typically go to business networking events, maybe BNI, maybe the local chamber, whatever. Ask people there. Okay, here's the HubSpot blog topic generator. Let's give it a go. So why don't we put making tax digital as sort of thing that you might want to rank highly on Google and get lots of things about. And let's talk about blogging. If we wanted to blog about blogging, we'll add that idea, and then it says, give me blog ideas. Let's see how we do. Okay, suggestions, making tax digital, expectations versus reality. It's going a bit slowly. Let's I think that might be my computer. Will blogging ever rule the world? Maybe, maybe not. The next big thing in making tax digital, where you could definitely write that. Blogging explained in fewer than 140 characters. Well, there is a challenge, although you'd want extra wording on that one to make Google treat it seriously. This week's top stories about making tax digital. Where will blogging be 1 year from now? Where will making tax digital be 1 year from now? 13 things about making tax digital you may not have known. So only into 7 of 250 suggestions it has, and that seems pretty useful for getting a few ideas going. Otherwise, brainstorm them with colleagues. I have to say, 3 or 4 accountants round a table often isn't the most creative environment I've been in. So make sure you bring it. So you don't get group think. Bring in people who don't think like accountants, employees, speak to your family, speak to friends. One business I knew would rope in anybody. If there was a courier in the building, they even involved the courier and the cleaner in their brainstorms to get an outside perspective. Anyway, get people in who give an outside perspective. And of course, make sure you read the industry papers, not just Accountancy Age, but the industry papers relevant to your prospects. What are the news affecting them? Okay, all over the internet are blogs that started well in a flush of enthusiasm, yet by week 3 things had started to go off target, and by month 3 they were as cobwebby as a haunted house in a horror film. How do you keep it going? Well, first of all, if you're a partner, you need to lead by example, but the key thing is having an editorial calendar, a realistic editorial calendar that's kept up to date, whether monthly or quarterly, which has who is going to be doing what and by when, perhaps even with the specific topic as well. For yourself and for other people, make sure it is diarised when you are going to write it. It's very easy for us to have a to-do list, lots of events come in, client demands, phone calls, something interesting you want to read, it all gets put to one side. So diarise a block of time where you're going to spend your time writing it. Think about things when you will be able to do it best. Are you a lark who comes in early and gets your best work done first thing in the morning? Or maybe you're a night owl who prefers to do things like this in the evening or at the end of the day when everyone's disappeared from the office. Think about your most productive time, diarise it for those sorts of things. And particularly critical is to delegate as much of the work as possible. If there's research that needs to be done, calculations, after all, you're accountants, so let's have some calculations in there. Delegate those bits to somebody else. Quite frankly, oh, yes.
So Tim, I'd just like to pitch in here, and I think this is probably one of the most important slides on this webinar. Setting up a routine is probably one of the most difficult tasks. I've come across, even while setting up the digital marketing team at Initor as well, and elsewhere as well. So setting up a calendar is most imperative, and then more so following it up, because following on your slides as well. One is coming up with the ideas, and two is sticking to the calendar. People sort of give up, obviously they're okay, fine, what do I write, how do I write, when do I write? So I think having a calendar and diarising it is really one of the most imperative tasks that one needs in place.
Absolutely, and all the other things you can aim to do with the blogs are irrelevant if it doesn't get written, and all the people there to support you, your marketing team, maybe you've got a PA or an assistant who's doing things, they can't play their part unless the blogs are being written. Again, make sure that other parts that you don't necessarily have to do are being handled. For instance, the posting it on the website, the coming up with the images, the search engine optimizing it, the promoting it through social media. There is a tendency for, at least amongst some accountants, to hold on to all these little bits of it. I'm afraid that is the, unless you are completely amazing at these sorts of things, and some people are, but most people, most accountants would be better served concentrating on advising clients and doing chargeable work. So you want to minimize the amount of effort by delegating as much as possible to your team members, getting people who have perhaps specialist knowledge, or making sure the people you do post it to get appropriate training and support so they can have the maximum impact and you can trust them to fulfill their part completely. What is particularly critical is having a proofreader. No matter how good your reading skills, once you've read something a few times, you become oblivious to the mistakes in it. The world's top writers, the world's top journalists have their material proofread. So should you, whether that proofreader is a colleague who has a particularly good eye for detail or a professional proofreader, as they're extremely cheap. But either way, get it proofread. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about engaging your team. This could be your professional team, your colleagues and partners. It can be your equally professional marketing professionals, whether they be in-house or freelance or in supporting agencies, but getting them involved is particularly critical. It's slightly easier to get freelancers and agencies motivated because you're paying for them, but with your colleagues, it's the soft skills that matter. So remember, you tell the big picture for the firm, the big picture for them. We've got to write 3 blogs per week because marketing says so is not very motivating. Make it talk about the importance to the firm. If the people aren't partners, talk about the importance of doing this as helping them prepare themselves for promotion, for partnership. Again, make it easy for them. Give it make sure it's a topic they want to write on, they feel comfortable writing on. Ensure they've had training, maybe about how to write, maybe it's about whatever it is that might be a block for them. Ultimately, think about getting a ghostwriter for them. A ghostwriter isn't someone who writes the whole thing on your behalf with no input, by the way. A ghostwriter is someone who gets your input and writes it on your behalf. That might be because they interview you, it might be because you provide them with blogs, bullet points and raw materials, but get a ghostwriter. I certainly don't advocate just paying someone to come up with blogs with no input from you. There's a lot of drawbacks to that. We might come on to that if people are particularly interested, and we can take that during the questions. Make doing the blog important, make marketing important. I've worked in lots of accountancy firms, and with the ones that don't grow, the mantra was always put clients first. So every time someone didn't want to bother with anything, they said, oh, I've got something's come up with a client. And you know what? They were always busy with client stuff and it never got done. Whereas the most successful people I dealt with, they got the most done, even when they were busy with clients and working flat out. They made it a priority. The reality is we're all busy. You're busy, everyone else is busy. It's simply a question of prioritization. Either you prioritize it or you don't. And part of this is making it your colleagues make them want to prioritize it. It's key with professional people, with people with degrees, that you give them feedback. Positive feedback, that doesn't mean you ignore the faults, but don't give it back with a load of red lines saying this was rubbish, try again. Give positive feedback, give feedback on its impact. There's tons of numbers about the impact. We will be coming on to those, but give them that sort of data. Informally, perhaps make it's a bit more competitive. Whose blogs are doing the best? That will certainly help fire on many people. And indeed, give recognition for people's efforts. There's plenty of research that shows the worst way to get recognition is to give recognition is to pay people. It suddenly creates all sorts of problems. The best way to give recognition are often free or low cost. A pat on the back, a favourable email from the managing partner for the blogging team and their efforts, maybe a spa day for the person whose blog gets the most traffic each year, maybe a box of chocolates or a bottle of champagne for people who are doing lots of blogs. Certainly do give recognition, but it doesn't have to be pay. Often the thoughtfulness is what matters, not the cost of it, but it is certainly the perceived value to the recipient, and perceived value is very different to cost. And again, have an editorial calendar to engage your team, make sure that they know this is a serious process that's been managed and that it will look bad on them if they don't pull their weight. And indeed, once someone has put a lot of effort into writing a post, don't have it sit around for 3 weeks while before it goes online. I certainly see that in big firms where there's some sort of convoluted approval process and a website that's managed overseas and all sorts of nonsense. Make sure that once someone's provided it to you, it gets promoted and posted quickly and efficiently, so that they know their effort is leading to a big impact. Okay. Part of maximizing this impact is very much around SEO, maximizing it, optimizing it for maximum impact with search engines. Now, first of all, there's been a long and ongoing battle between digital agencies and Google. Google wants people to be able to find interesting, relevant content that deals with their question, and digital agencies have been trying to game the system so that their blogs gain unfair advantage. The reality is that Google has largely beaten them, and it is every attempt to game the system has led to an upgrade in Google's algorithm that has negated that impact. And so you can still tweak your blogs for short-term impact, but the reality is Google is constantly striving to put people in, point them in the direction of credible pages that give a good answer, and they're sort of from credible firms with which have been endorsed by other people. So if you create good quality content regularly and apply a few tips that will help Google realize who this content is particularly relevant for, whatever changes Google will do, you will always do well. So let me share some of those pointers. Now, the first thing is thinking about your strategy rather than just throwing up any old random stuff on it. You need to have a key phrase strategy, and key phrases are the sorts of phrases that people you want to get to your website would use when searching for the sorts of things you want to talk to them about. So the first thing to do is create a persona, or indeed personas, of who you are actually aiming at. Now, if your persona is pretty vague, such as every business owner within 30 miles of my office, that quite frankly isn't very helpful, and you need to try harder. A example, and there's lots of stuff out there on creating personas, but ultimately you need to work harder at them. For instance, and the more detailed persona and the more specific you can be about the people you're writing for, the more you can write for that person, and the more traffic you will get from that person, and indeed the more the blog will speak to them when they arrive. So think a bit about, are you particularly aiming at, for instance, startups, scale-ups, mid-sized, agriculture and farming businesses, fintech? Who are the sorts of people? Are you particularly aiming at people who, for instance, are finance directors? Are you aiming at owners? Things like that. Now, clearly you're an accountancy firm that aims at a broad range of people, and the tendency is our blog must cater for every single one of them. I would urge you to fight that thought and concentrate on what you see as your growth areas for the future, or your core areas, or the areas that are going to deliver the most traffic for the future, rather than simply aiming at every single business in the area and every single client.
Absolutely, Tim, and so that's where I would also say, even from sales and marketing perspective, creating a client profile more so just like, re-endorsing what Tim said is, one is, figuring out what niche are you sort of going to cater into, and obviously who is your target audience from the decision making and influencing perspective. So, be it the food industry, managing directors or finance directors that you want to reach out to, and then, obviously creating that profile, and then so on, obviously going ahead with your targeted content.
Absolutely. So once you've created this persona, you can be more clear about what are their problems. So for instance, if you are aiming at startups, then doing lots of blogs about succession planning probably isn't going to help you, as that's not on their mind, whereas fundraising and capital allowances and, what are the financial requirements for new directors and things like that would be very much about it. And indeed, you can start to show your expertise in the areas that matter to them rather than just have lots of random stuff. Most importantly, if you know the sort of people you are going for and you know their problems, then you can start to think about the search phrases they would use. And you want to write blogs that allow you to, quite frankly, have these search phrases in a lot of the time. So, as an example, as a firm of accountants, you probably are deeply interested in making tax digital, and you probably want business owners who have questions about making tax digital and are searching online to come to you. So for instance, you might say, well, you particularly want micro business owners with MTD worries to get your blog, read some wise words from you, and perhaps get in touch with their queries. So you've got to think about things like, would they even use the acronym MTD? Would they even use the term making tax digital? Would they perhaps use something like help with making tax digital? Or would they use something broader like advice on new HMRC tax changes? Or maybe they're based in Oxford. Oxford is in your catchment area. Would they use a term like Oxford tax experts? Or would they be more likely to want people who know about their sector? And maybe you deal a lot with catering businesses, or maybe you feel that at the moment the HMRC is cracking down on catering businesses, so you're keen to blog about, to attract them. So maybe you would want to have something that says Oxford tax specialists for catering businesses. You've got to think about these sorts of things, and it's particularly important because for instance, making tax digital, if you want to compete on that, you're up against everybody, and it's very hard to come top of Google. And if you don't come top of Google, very few people will find you, because over 90% of people don't really get past the first page or so of Google. So if you're appearing on page 4 for people who search making tax digital, you're not going to get any benefit from that. Whereas if you are going for much what's called longer tail searches, for instance, Oxford tax specialists or Oxford tax experts for catering businesses, now these phrases are probably searched much less, but the people who use them are very interested in these topics, and it's much more feasible for you to get to the top of Google for these sorts of very specific phrases with your blog. And what you'll find is that you will have a very much higher engagement rate, because people searching on these have a very specific need. They see your blog, which very much meets that need, and they're much more likely to get engaged, get in contact. So again, that's something for you to think about. Do you want to do badly in a high search area, or do you want to do well across a range of low search but very relevant areas? And actually, particularly when you're starting out, I would urge that as a much more achievable strategy than trying to take on hundreds of high credibility websites, which actually most of the traffic isn't very relevant to you anyway. So we talked about having a key phrase strategy. There's lots about online that you can look at in terms of how to optimize the page, but ultimately it's very straightforward. Once you've got this key phrase, make sure it appears in the web address of it, the URL, make sure it appears in the heading and some of the subheadings, add a image to the blog. Blogs with at least one image do dramatically better than blogs with no images, but blogs with several images, actually there's not much evidence that more than one image has much of an impact. Video, adding video has a big impact. The meta text is hidden text that appears when in Google when people search. So make sure that that's compelling so that when you appear, they actually do want to click on it. If you've got external links, make sure they don't break, i.e. the web page you're linked to disappears. This is something you should be checking on your website regularly. Do get incoming links, and this is very much where encouraging people to mention it in their blogs, social media links comes in, and we'll be talking about that. And ultimately, don't save money by going to a cheap host. Google likes fast loading websites, so make sure your website is loading nice and quick. And indeed, there's stuff out there which will tell you whether this is going on or not. Okay, we have talked about how to get people to the website, how to get the blogs up there. So we've got people coming to your fabulous blogs. How do we maximize the number of them that convert into leads? Well, certainly ensuring it's well SEO'd and well promoted on social media are the absolute core of this, as well as ensuring your blogs are interesting and memorable to the people visiting. And what I'd say is that if you've got a good idea of who you're writing for and you've got a good idea of their problems, then it is going to be interesting and memorable. Whereas if you're throwing up any old stuff because you need to do something or it's of interest to your people, then it's not going to hit the mark. And that's why you need to be clear about who you're targeting and what their problems are. But there are lots of on-page techniques to help get people responding from. First of all, most people, when they go to a blog, they don't want to read it end to end without ascertaining that it's going to be of interest to them. They want to give it a quick skim. So use bold, boldings, italics, subheadings, lists, images, all of these sorts of things. So someone skimming it can get a good idea of it and whether it's of interest to them. Can I just add at this point, there is a lot of poor advice out there that is along the lines of most people don't spend much time on websites, so you needn't bother having more than a few words on it. This is clearly nonsense for, well, first of all, going back to the earlier stats, that actually you get the best results from longer blogs. But secondly, if you were to think about your own viewing habits, you don't read every single thing end to end without first ascertaining from the title or the first few paragraphs or a quick skim whether it's relevant, interesting to you. So people certainly bounce out of them. Now you need to be looking at why do people bounce out of your blogs? Is that because you've got the wrong people coming to the website? Is it because you've got the right people, but the blog isn't engaging with them? And certainly making it easier for people to skim so they know if it's relevant to them or not, or rather you signal to them that it is relevant, is very important. Secondly, very important is adding more internal links into the text to send people to other blogs on your website. For more information, go here. This starts getting people more engaged with your blog, rather than just thinking, oh, well, they'll go back to the menu and hunt around for these things. Clearly they won't. Life's too short for that. They rightly would expect you to point them in the direction. Don't just have a list at the side of recent blogs or things like this. Have links within the text. And thirdly, you need to purposefully think about, if someone comes to this web page, what is the conversion funnel, i.e. how are we going to get them in contact? This is where professional firms, particularly accountants, are very poor. They sort of think, oh, well, if people are interested, they'll track us down and whatever. This is complete nonsense. You need to make it as easy as possible for people. And if you're on consumer websites, that's where they excel with all sorts of prompts to get people engaged and buy-in. You really need to be doing that as well. So don't have your phone number hidden away somewhere on a contact us page. Yes, have a contact us page, but do have your phone number so people can just pick up the phone while it's on their mind. Do have call to action boxes, things like click here for a consultation, click here to subscribe to our newsletter, click here to download our free guide, click here to whatever the offer is. Prompt people in the text as well as through a box. If it's a long article, don't expect them to go all the way back up to the top. Prompt them at the top, prompt them at the bottom, maybe prompt them somewhere in the middle as well. Pop-ups, anathema to accountants. Don't know why. Give it an experiment and see. And that's particularly important. Do experiment and see which of your pages work the best, which of them don't. Learn from it. Maybe have A and B tests. Do something on one page, do something on another page. People have noticed that even little changes such as the colour of the boxes where you are asking people to respond, different colours have been found to have different effects. But don't just rely on what other people have done, experiment for yourself. Now, measuring impact. What I have found, both through being in-house, but also much more recently, is when it comes to marketing metrics, accountancy firms are amongst the worst in the world. It is ironic. Accountants see accountancy as hard, and they see marketing as fluffy, yet proper marketing is done based on metrics, measurements and science, and the only thing fluffy I find in marketing is the attitude of accountants. And indeed that is not just towards marketing. When I worked in accountancy firms, I can honestly say the worst management information I ever had was within accountancy firms, and the same applies to their marketing management information as well. There is no excuse for it. You're accountants, you're a number of people. Get the numbers for your website, for your blogging, for your social media, and sort it out and assess what is going on. It is very straightforward to track the value that you are getting from your marketing. You need to get with it and start measuring it. You use timesheets, use the same methodical approach to other areas of your business. So what is it we're looking to measure? Well, you can have things like being better known and easier to find. Well, it's possible to measure. Are you getting better to known, and are you getting easier to find? Ultimately, are you getting more clients from it? If you don't know where your clients from, then clearly you can't track these things. If you ask your clients, if you track them through a CRM or through your marketing system as they start as leads and end up as clients, you know where these things are being done. And indeed, with proper marketing infrastructure, you can know whether people came from a networking event, whether they first found you through social media, whether they first found you through the website. How did they first get in contact with you? How did they travel through the funnel to become a client? Blogging is all about maintaining relationships. So you should be measuring engagement. How is it being used in social media? What impact you're getting? What is the impact through your email marketing? Lots of information out there. You should be looking, what are the key metrics for you, and ascertaining it. You want to build a reputation for expertise. After all, this brings referrals and wins. You should be measuring these. How many referrals are you getting? How many wins are you getting? How is your win rate improving? Etc., etc. All of these sorts of things, if you've got the infrastructure in place, it becomes much easier to measure the impact of your marketing, the impact of your sales. Don't just rely on Google Analytics. There's tons of other information out there. You should be looking at the overall effectiveness of your website. What's the traffic? What are the sources? What's the successful, unsuccessful page? How many links are you building up? What's your domain authority and how is it improving? All of these sorts of things. You should be looking at the impact of each blog. What's the traffic? What's the engagement? What are the things that are getting clicked? What can you learn from them? What can you learn from having done different blogs differently, or indeed the same blog with an A/B test to see which one works? And you should be reviewing the data monthly. You should be tasking someone to get this data together, and so you can review it monthly. As a for instance, I mentioned we use HubSpot. I don't know if this is particularly visible, but as a quick snapshot of some of the sorts of things you can get through HubSpot, you can get it through other packages as well. Just make sure you are getting it. This is a blog that is I wrote a couple of years ago. As you will see from this chart where my cursor is hovering, it bobbled along. And this top one is organic search. This is the number of people who found it on Google. Suddenly, between December and January, it leapt. Oh no, that's that's October and November. It leapt. Well, December's always a quiet month, so it dropped down again. And then it's leapt up and it's continued to be pretty high, with it going down low in August, partly because we're halfway through August and partly because it's a quiet month. So this first of all tells me, wow, there's something going on right with this blog. Secondly, it tells me I need to investigate further what happened there, because if I can apply that to other blogs, then I've got a real formula for success. You should be looking at your blogs like this too. In terms of other data it's showing me, it's telling me where my traffic is coming from. Is it organic search? Is it direct traffic, social media, referrals, that's from other websites? Is it from paid search? And I can click down here. So for instance, I know that it says social media. In fact, that's all from Twitter. So I can go back and sort of start saying, well, was it because there was a particularly successful tweet? If so, I can understand why that was, or was it just because we did lots of tweets of it and we stopped tweeting this, and that's why it isn't effective. Also, I can look at things like bounce rates and engagement rates, and what I can find here is that people who found it through Twitter actually didn't spend very long on it or engage very much with it, whereas people who came from organic search actually spent 8 minutes on average reading that article, so they were pretty engaged with it. So that says to me I should be perhaps doing more to convert these people, but also it suggests to me that organic search and making more effort with the search engine optimization pays better dividends as we're getting better quality leads through organic search than through other sources. Okay. Well, we're going to be coming on to questions in just a moment. I just wanted to let you know about our blogging service before we do that, as I hope you'll excuse a quick commercial break. I'm not going to go through all the details, just suffice to say that all of these things you can do yourselves, maybe all of these things you will do yourselves. And I hope I provided the information either to do it or to point you in the right direction to research particular areas in more detail. Suffice to say, if you don't want to do it, or indeed you want to add to your armory, we have a highly effective blogging service that overcomes all the problems I've mentioned and has a good track record of building domain authority, traffic, and engagement for our clients. And I'd just like to say we have some more webinars coming up. So I do hope if you've enjoyed this one, you will join us on the other webinars. Okay.
So, anybody, any questions? Obviously, you can definitely answer. I think, Tim, we've got one question here from James. Basically, it's more about again on the content side of things. How do you verify if the content has not been copied or it's not a duplicate blog, with just some minute changes? How do you go about it? So that's what he's trying to say.
Yes, well, I think that's a very good question, particularly if you've outsourced your writing, and you'll know that there are lots of blogging, very low-cost blogging services, and you'll see these people all over the place, including places like People Per Hour and Fiverr offering really cheap services. And ultimately, you've got to ask yourself how they've achieved that. And there is a big danger that they are simply copy-pasting someone else's content. There's lots of problems with this, putting aside the ethical and intellectual property side of things. Google doesn't like duplicated content. There are search engine tools out there which will tell you how much content, if it's available elsewhere, or indeed how much is being repeated on your own website. You don't want to keep repeating the same stuff on your website. The other way is to take chunks of it, put them into Google and get Google to search, and it will track them down as well. What I would also say, though, is a particular problem for accountancy firms is accountancy firms buy in a lot of their content. Every budget I get 5 or 6 tax ready reckoners from local firms hoping to stand out and attract me, but all these tax ready reckoners are the same, and except for the logos on them. So all they've done is reinforce my impression that they're all the same as each other rather than standing out. So my warning to accountancy firms who do buy in their content is to be very careful that you don't end up paying whether it's a lot of money or a little money, to not stand out at all, but in the eyes of visitors and Google, actually devalue yourself by looking the same as other accountancy firms.
Good. Any more questions, anybody? Tim, I think obviously this is it, from the questions perspective, and obviously you got Tim's details and my details as well. So if anybody's got any questions, feel free to sort of reach out to us, and especially from Tim's perspective, he's an expert at this thing, and I'm sure he'd be more than happy to assist.
Yes, indeed. So do drop us a line, and we'll be emailing you shortly with the questionnaire and indeed the content as well. So please do reply, and I will be sending links to relevant blogs as well to go into some of the points more detail. So a big thank you to everyone for joining us live, and indeed we've got a number of people who are going to be who've requested the recording, so a big thank you to them once they listen to it as well.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks very much again for hosting this presentation, and obviously you're insightful on content blogging for accountancy firms, and thanks everybody for attending the webinar.
Yes, and thank you, Clayton, as well, and have a good day, everyone.